I'm working out in the chicken yard again today. Another really cold day. A little bit sunny sometimes, at least it's not very windy. And we've had some pretty powerfully cold nights. Last night was -5 Fahrenheit. And the other night, a few nights ago, it was -15 Fahrenheit with a fair bit of wind, which is, I think, the coldest air temperature we've had in a few years here. Definitely not as low as it can get. We can get to -25. So the first part of this video, I'd like to review our chicken composting system now that we've had some extreme test nights. Is it able to stay warm enough for them? And then the second part can be about the beginning stages of what I will hope will be a really nice upgrade, which is this carport that we're repurposing into a much larger high tunnel space. We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the compost first. Is it able to survive the cold? Is it serving our hens' needs during this really intense winter? Let's see. So the air temperature last night, -5 Fahrenheit. I think right now it's probably about 10 degrees, maybe, something like that outside here. Here is just a random sampling. I didn't pick any particular spot. Now I went through yesterday and added a whole lot more material to this, including a bunch of frozen nuggets. Now that there's enough warmth in here, the compost is able to melt elements that are being added in, as long as I don't overload the system. But that's a pretty healthy temperature for such a cold night last night. And we haven't covered this at all. We're going to talk about some experiments in covering this to insulate it better for the coldest of nights. But it's working. Yeah, I just put the temperature probe right in here randomly. I didn't think it through, just chose a spot. But then when I pulled it out, I looked over here where a hen was scratching and I see steam shooting out. And I wonder, now keep in mind, I didn't add hot water. I didn't come out and do something weird to make it, to pretend that it's some other temperature. This is what it actually is right now. And this is entirely driven by the composting process in a landscape that has seen a couple of nights in a row of negative temperatures. We'll have more of them. It's a pretty stunning situation here. And each time they scratch, it releases a little bit more steam. Some of these hens are hanging out on this and really enjoying it. So this is functional. It's really working. The ingredients are making sense. The approach is making sense, but we're hitting a very intense wall with what we can do in here. So we need that level of volume in order to get enough inertia to have it coast through the coldest of nights. But this doorway, I mentioned this in the last video, this doorway just keeps getting tighter and tighter. In fact, for me to come into this space, I have to get under, and then it's about that much space. And both Sasha and I try to come in here each day to turn a bunch of compost for the hens. She's smaller than I am by quite a bit, and it's getting to be really not possible for her to comfortably move in here. We're going to throw our back out on a cold morning trying to move hot steaming compost hunched over fully. So I spoke with our neighbor, another neighbor 2 doors down. I actually randomly saw 2 carports that he had set up next to his garage out by the woods, all tattered, and I knocked on his door randomly and I said, "Hey, are you using those?" And he said, "Oh, you can take one of them if you want." So that was pretty worthwhile to go knock on someone's door. This is a very rinky-dink carport, but I think it may work for us. It is 8 feet tall in the middle. That would be a remarkably delicious upgrade to be able to stand up fully. And it goes down to about 6.5 feet on the corners. It is 12 feet wide, whereas our high tunnel right now is 7.5 feet wide. So not twice as wide, but not too far off. And it's 20 feet long. Our high tunnel is 16 feet long, so it gives us some additional length off the back. It's a bit of a tight fit. This walkway in here will be a little bit tough. And so, but I think it's gonna be a huge upgrade for us. The trick in here now is to figure out how to get it reinforced enough that it can handle the snows we get and not have plastic fall in. Ultimately, we'll take this apart and pull it out, but I don't want to do that until this is framed fully and ready to be skinned. It was fun trying to put this together. Juan and I spent a very frigid afternoon in the driveway looking at all the poles and the nuts and the bolts. This was taken apart a few years ago, so the memory was quite a distant, faded thing. But luckily with the internet, we found a random number printed on one of these and searched for that online along with assembly instructions and found an old PDF that let us trudge our way through building this. And we jotted down some notes from the internet before we put it together. What I realized as I was finalizing the assembly this morning, I was missing just a handful of nuts and bolts. These ones here. So I drove a 4-minute drive to a local hardware store to buy a couple more bolts. And the sweetness of that, so we got all the parts we needed to finalize all the rest of the construction. On the way back, I was driving by a greenhouse that's getting sold. And there was this laying on the side of the road, which is this black plastic. It has insulation material on the inside, bubble wrap insulation. So it's meant to insulate beds, probably in greenhouses. They were throwing it out. I know I never would buy this new. I'm not trying to buy new plastic if I can, but it's frayed here or there, but it's got insulation. So we can figure out how to fold this into part of our design to be able to really, really insulate some of the compost on the coldest nights. And a couple of years ago, I made a video, I'll link to it here, where we talked about getting free greenhouse plastic. We have some friends that run some very large greenhouses. Wherever you are, there might be some nurseries or farms that periodically replace the skin on their high tunnels. And we just went out and helped them load up the truck and then trimmed off the dead parts. This is a 32 by 20-ish, and it's wet in the middle, according to that. Oh, wet and muddy. So this will be a great one for the chicken yard. So we're in $10 in total to build that new structure and upgrade, and got some free insulation while we're at it. It's cold enough that the camera battery will not last much longer, but just kind of making a note of what will be coming here. I think the next step with this, we've got it laid out exactly where we want it, is to hopefully be able to pound some sharpened locust staves down next to these, use some wire tie to twist them in so that the structure itself won't want to lift. Figure out some sort of runner board made out of locust that is permanent on the bottom, that we can have 14 gauge fencing wire go up and over this to add a lot more space. It's kind of stunning how little support there is for plastic in the middle of this. So there's a lot more reinforcing to be done. Too cold for me to be videotaping that. So I'll just putter away at it in a foolish, silly way until it kind of comes together enough to work. And once we're ready to get a skin on there and think about the doors, we'll make another update video. $10. It's actually going to be making this much larger structure. It'll be $90 cheaper than what this structure was, because we didn't have to buy all the cattle panels. So always worth asking around for free stuff. If you've got some ideas on how we can make this structure extra tidy and nice and strong in our scrappy style, feel free to share some notes. If you got some questions, let us know. And hopefully where you are, it's warmer than where we are. Or if it's colder, I hope you're keeping yourselves and your animals and everybody around you nice and warm and cozy. And we'll share more updates as we go. But for now, my fingers are frozen, my phone is cold. It's time for me to go back to touching metal in the shade in the winter. Take care.